Allie with Potomac Beads. Join me in making this Swarovski flower necklace. It's based on a little bit of right angle weave and really sparkles. You can make it as actually a single component for earrings, a bracelet, or for a stunning necklace. If you need any supplies, check out the links below to shop with us online. Gather up your materials and let's get started. So to start our floral design, what you want is some .006 wildfire beading thread. I'm using the white color and I have it on a size 10 needle. If you want to, you can also have it on a size 12 needle. We're going to begin by putting a bead that is not in the project on the thread, and we're going to use that as a stop bead. So I have a stop bead here that I'm going to add in the pink color, and I'm going to put it on my thread and needle. Let it drop down to the base of that thread, and I don't need a ton left, just enough to tie a knot. And I'm going to take my thread through once and twice. From here, we're going to sew through our first crystal, and our center of our flowers are always going to be the same. I have the Siam color in the 6mm bead. From here, we are going to wrap 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 of our 11 seed beads around the crystal. After putting on the crystal, we put the 9 beads on, and we're going to go back through the crystal, starting at the stop bead and going towards the top. From here, go ahead and add 9 more. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And these are the Miyuki brand seed beads, Crystal Labrador full 11 O's. Going back through again, starting at that stop bead and around to the side. And you'll see that kind of takes care of the outer edge here and links those two sides together. From here, I want to go through all the seed beads one more time. So I'm going to go through the outer ridge. There's 1, 2, and I'm going to sew back through all these seed beads. When I get to the end, in order to connect the sides, I want you to add 1 more 11O. So you'll end up a total of 20 11Os that are going to be around the crystal. Making sure as you go the whole way around that you do not miss one of the beads. And then when you get back to the edge here, add 1 more crystal and continue around. It'll end up looking a little bit like an oval as it goes through that bicone bead. Coming out the beads then, I'm coming out the first 2 beads after the bicone there, and I have my connector. And what I'm going to pick up on my thread and needle is I'm going to do 2 different colors, an interior color of my flower and then the second petal flower color. So from here, I'm going to add 1 of my light cyan. I'm going to add onto that an 11O to separate out the beads. 15 O's are going to sit on the sides of the exterior color. Then I'm going to do an 11O and 1 more of my light cyan. The 11O color that I'm currently using is Tanzanite. So I have 4mm crystal, 11-15, 4mm crystal, and then 15-11 and crystal. Coming back through the thread now, those 2 beads that my thread is currently coming out of, I'm going to sew back through those 2 beads so these petals get circled around. And after coming out through those 2 beads then, I'm going to sew through the next 2 11O. Coming out those 2 11O, go ahead and put on 1 more of your Siam bead, 1 more 11O seed bead, a 15 crystal, 15, and then I'm not adding another 11O on the side. What I'm going to do is work backwards and go through my 11 and my Siam from the previous little petal that I did, going back towards the center of the 6mm Swarovski bicone. That's going to get my petal as my exterior. From here, go back through the 2 seed beads that your thread just came out of to add that petal. Sew through the next 2, and we're going to continue on. Again, 4mm crystal, 11O crystal, 15 crystal, 15, and the 15s I'm using are the exact same color, so I'm using the Crystal Labrador the whole way through. So back then through, going backwards through the last 11 and Siam crystal from the previous petal. Again, sew through the 2 beads that your thread was coming out of when you made that petal. Then on to the next 2 and repeat. Going the whole way around then, we're going to add our petals the whole way around our flower. As you're going through the design then and you get to the end, which you're going to end up, if you do 10 beads around the circle, a total of 20 of those beads, you're going to end up with 10 crystals of each color. I'm coming out the last of my 2 11-0 seed beads. I've already used my 10 light Siam 4mm crystals. And I'm going to sew up through the first light Siam crystal that I added on the very first petal of the project, as well as up through the 11-0 seed bead. From there, I'm going to grab my last of my Tanzanite bead, adding a 15 between or on either side. From here, go back through to the last petal, going through that first 11-0 there, right there, as well as the 4mm petal that you concluded with. That's going to pull this into a nice circular floral design. From here, go ahead and sew back through those 2 11-0 seed beads that led up to the first petal, out through that first Siam, through the first 11-0, and then out through that first 15 and crystal. That'll bring you out on the outer edge of the thread here, and then we're going to continue with a little bit more of the design. If you're getting ready to connect this flower to your next flower in your space, and I also wanted to show this example where I used 8 beads, you can see in the middle, and then a total of 18 11-0s. You can see how much bigger or smaller the flower looks. So if you're ready to add your flowers together, you're going to keep that thread on and go out to this 4mm bead. If you are not ready and you want to just make a bunch of the flowers to start, you're going to come back down the design for the other direction towards the center of the design, go through the 11-0s, so basically we're just kind of reinforcing that edge, through that middle 6mm Siam bead, take your stop bead off, and tie the 2 thread ends together. If your design is starting to do a little bit of kind of waffling, you're going to want to try your spacing a little bit differently if you're trying with a different sized beads. Most of the time what's going to happen is there's not enough space between the outer rows and it starts to curl up or down on the design. Once you have those beads tied off there, go ahead and take your thread and needle that is still on, go back into the 11-0s a little bit right nearby, and separate out the thread ends. From here, go in and burn down your 2 thread ends on either side of the piece. I'm going to continue now making a bunch of my flowers to hook together for my design, going along with some of the different colors that I have. The centers are all going to be that Siam. I have the Amethyst, Tanzanite, Fuschia, light rose, rose, and then that Padparadscha. So I have all of these colors to make lots of flowers to make my necklace beautiful, or you can do it as a bracelet design. So just to show the different size of the crystal flowers, when you're using a different size and amount of seed beads in the middle, that's when you're going to get the different amount of beads. I've continued building my flowers here, going from anywhere from 20 seed beads in the middle to 16 seed beads in the middle. That's obviously going to change the size of the flower. And as I go in and add these all to my necklace, I'll alternate some of the bigger and larger ones. I'm going to continue using up some of my pile here of all of my crystals, adding some more flowers before I go in and do some of my right angle weave square stitching to add them together in the design. Once you're finished making all of your beautiful flowers, it's time to sew them together to make the necklace. I have them set up here kind of backwards so you could see upside down. And what we're going to do is we are going to start out, and you can see I have varying sizes to mine. I'm going to start out here in the middle with my biggest pendant. From there, I'm going to go into my next size, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to attach them on the corners here where the 15 O's match and the 11 O's come out. From there, I'll build up, attaching again at a higher point, and then we'll build up from there, again attaching at a higher point. Now you can make your necklace all of these, that's perfectly fine, but I'm going to show you how we're going to start attaching these pieces together. And you want to think about also the way that you want your crystal in the middle to sit might affect how you attach them together. What we're going to do to start out with is sew up through one of our crystals and out through one of our 11 O seed beads. I'm just going to simply hold the end of my thread here as a stop and sew through one of my 15 O's. You can choose to do all different kinds of connection pieces in order to add these together. I'm going to use only seed beads because I want my crystal flowers to really stand out. But if you want to, you could add some green crystals to look like leaves and even do some leaf pattern as well. From here, coming out of the 15O next to the crystal, what I'm going to do is add another 15O, an 11O, and a 15O onto my needle. Go ahead and let that drop down next to your design. Go over to whichever piece you want to pick up next, and you're going to sew into the 15O on the opposite side. When I sew into the 15O on the opposite side, I'm making sure that I'm sewing from the crystal over towards the seed bead. From here, I want you to go down the crystal and the seed bead, and I want you to find that original thread pass. We're going to tuck underneath the original thread pass. If you need to, you can go to the back of the design with your needle, then come back to the front of the design. Wiggle that thread so that way it sits in between the beads. Give a nice tight pull, and sew back up through the crystal as well as the 11O seed bead. That's going to work to anchor the piece together. From here, go ahead and sew through your next 15O on that same side that your thread is currently working on. Coming out there then, you are going to repeat the pattern, 15, 11, 15. Go into that 11O, or sorry, the 15O that sits next to the crystal there at the base of the design. From there, you're going to see quite a simple little seed bead connection that's finished. From here, sew down to the design, down through the crystal. The stop bead is going to be right there, but rather than going right through the stop bead, I want you to do like I did on the other side, going underneath the bridge thread, not sewing on any extra beads, coming back up between two of those 11O seed beads, and then tie the thread together. Like I said, there's countless number of ways that you can do this connection, and this is just one of the most simple ways to have it done. I'm going to continue then, after I tie this off and burn this down, adding all of my connections onto my piece. From here, I'm going to go into, skip over two of my crystals of my larger one here, and connect my next crystal to the top. Once you get your flowers all connected, and I did want to show here that in the middle of my original flower, I have two open spaces and then I connected. The next ones, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 open spaces on either side, and then I connected to bring it out a little bit more rounded. From there, I have 1, 2 extra spaces, and then I attach the last of my crystals. You can obviously do this really, really fun, that if you want to do it in greens and reds, it can look like poinsettias, vary up the color. And then with my extra crystals, what I'm going to do is make a band of 11O seed beads with my crystals that are left, almost in an ombre style, going from my lightest and curling around then to my darkest crystal as I go in and attach my simple toggle clasp. Coming out of the design here at the end, I'm going to do just like I did when I went through and added on these crystal little flowers. From here, I'm going to do the same thing, except the first thing I'm going to do is actually add a stop bead to hold my thread in place. We're going to string our piece on some beading thread, and I'm still using the 0.006 beading thread. I'm just adding a stop bead to the end of the project. This eventually will come off and we will attach to the end of the flower. So just like we've been doing, we're going to attach kind of here to the outer edge, except right now I'm going to sew through my last of my crystals here. So on the outermost side, I'm showing through one of my last 4mm crystals. The stop bead will stop the thread from falling off the actual crystal. From here, I want you to add 1, 2, 3, and 4 of your 15-0 seed beads. Oh, I missed my crystal there. I'm going to sew out here. Somehow I missed going through my crystal. Take those seed beads off. We'll do this one more time, sewing through that 4mm crystal. Then having your stop bead stop. Go ahead and add those 4 15-0s onto your thread and needle. Add your 1 6mm bead. Let that drop down next to your thread. Eventually what we'll do is we'll come back on the design then, and we will form a little V over that crystal. From here, it's up to you what you want the pattern to be. I'm going to add 2 11-0 seed beads, then pick up the darkest of my beads, 2 more 11-0s, and continue picking up those crystals. Continuing on, 2 more 11s, and going the whole way to the back of the project. The amount of seed beads that you use and the amount of crystals that you use is going to be determined by the amount of length you want your necklace to sit. I want mine to sit right about 17 inches. I want it nice and short so it sits right above my V. After you get to the end of your crystal row, and mine is right about 5 inches, I'm going to go through and add my toggle clasp. So bar goes on one side, loop goes the other. You can add any sort of clasp that you want. As I enter and do my last crystal, I have 3 11-0 seed beads that sit right after. I'm going to go back through those 3 seed beads. Give a nice tight pull. Oops, sorry, just 2 of them. After you go through those 2, I want you to add 1 more 11-0 that's going to sit kind of right on the side, and go back up through those 3 beads and through that loop again. This is going to reinforce this clasp so that way you don't have just one thread going through. Come back down through those 2 beads again after looping through the clasp. And after you come back down through those 2 beads here, making sure your thread's not going around the toggle bar, that it's just going through the loop, I want you to go through that 1 11-0 that you just added, that outer one, bringing it more towards center. You're going to sew through the 11-0 in that light rose color, the whole way down through the rose, the Padparadscha, the light Siam, the Fuschia, the Tanzanite, the Amethyst, and the whole way down through the 6mm bead. Once you get the whole way back down through the design then, you are going to go over here to the crystal. We're going to separate it out, adding 4 more seed beads here, bringing it over and tying it off. When you get into the end of the piece, after coming out through that 6mm, add your 4 15-0 seed beads, and then you're going to sew through the crystal that your thread was coming out of when you did this side of your necklace. That's going to create a little V effect right there that the clasp will come and link off to. To finish it off, I'm going to sew down into this final petal here. And I have a lot of thread on because I'm going to do my other side as well. So down through the next 2 11-0s coming towards you. Up through that next 4mm crystal as well as the 11-0 there. Through the 15 right next to that Tanzanite crystal. And then guess what? Your thread ends are in the same spot. You're going to take this thread and tie it off. What I did try to concentrate on doing as I was doing the necklace and those connection points is making sure that all of my connection points, and every time I did my thread burner, I had it all to one side. So it is kind of distinguished that you have a front and a back to the design. This is currently on the front of my design, so I'll make sure to kind of pull that knot towards the back. Take my needle and thread that is still connected, go back through that Tanzanite bead, pull a little bit to get that knot to come inside that Tanzanite bead. From here, take your thread strap or your thread burner and burn off the extra thread, burning it down. Go back through your project, making sure all your thread ends look nice and burnt down and are burnt flush against the project to help keep those knots in line. From here, I have this one side. I'm going to go through, do the other side of my necklace, and in the same fashion, and add on my toggle loop. Thanks so much for joining me in making this fun Swarovski flower necklace. Remember, you can do this as a pair of earrings, you can do it as a bracelet, as all different components going the whole way up the neck if you want. You can have a lot of fun with colors and even the size of flowers that you do make. Remember, if you do need any materials, check the links below to shop with us online. You can also make sure to hit that little subscribe button in the corner so you don't miss anything from us here at Potomac Beads. Likewise, make sure to comment as well as like the video. When you comment, it helps to build the beading community. This is a great way to say what you have used, some ideas that you have, or even ask some questions. As always, thank you guys so much for watching and enjoy your Swarovski flower component, and if you make it, into a necklace.